How are you guys doing? Today is Sunday, January 24th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an individual profile on Whit Merrifield, the elite second baseman for the Kansas City Royals, who today has turned 32 years old. And with all of the individual profiles I'm doing on birthdays, I'm just going to first just go through the list of accomplishments and accolades that they have, of course, accomplished up until this very date. And of course, I'm also providing justification in my reasoning through their resume as to why I believe these specific athletes stand out within their own sports. Because of course, to make the MLB, you have to be an elite baseball player. But of course, Whit Merrifield, as one of the best as one of the best hitters in all of baseball, just by that, he's elite amongst the elite. So I'm going to get into him a little bit. If you don't know who Whit Merrifield is, he currently wears number 15 for the Kansas City Royals. He originally from South Carolina. He played for the University of South Carolina, and after 3 years of South Carolina, he was drafted in the 9th round of the 2010 MLB draft. And then really kind of just moved around the minors. He wasn't promoted to the Kansas City Royals until 2016, until he was already about 26, 27 years old. So this, kind of a later debut than a lot of other players that you would get on my list. For instance, he missed the Kansas City Royals season in 2015 where they won the World Series. The next year was his very first season there, and he's never even sniffed the playoffs ever since he's been on the Royals, but he's been putting up pretty good numbers since he got there. So in his age 27 season, in 2016, his age 27 season, he would play 81 games in a season where the Kansas City Royals finished with the third best record in their division, with an 81-81 record, the best record that a Whit Merrifield team would be a part of, the best winning percentage. The only time that he was on a team that didn't finish with a losing record was this year, because they finished 500. In his 81 games, he finished with 88 hits, which is more hits than games. He had 22 doubles in that amount of time, which is kind of crazy. He had 44 runs, which is more than half a run per game. He also added 2 runs, 29 RBIs, a 283 batting average as well, as he was slowly starting to ascend himself into being a regular starter on the Kansas City Royals roster. But of course, that was his first year. Jumping in at 2017, his age 28 season, he would play 145 games in a season where the Kansas City Royals would finish with an 80-82 record. This would be the last time a Kansas City team with Whit Merrifield on it would win 80 games in a season. But of course, in this season, he would get a lot better. In his first full season as an MLB player, Whit Merrifield in those 145 games, he finished with 169 hits, which is more hits, and he finished with 80 runs, which is a very solid amount of runs for your first full season in the league. He had 32 doubles, first time he posted 30 doubles in a season, 19 home runs, 78 RBIs. He had 34 stolen bases, which led the American League in stolen bases, the first time he ever led. He finished with a 288 batting average, which is better than the previous season. He had a 784 OPS, which is also better than the previous season. So you could see he's gradually getting better and better as a baseball player, even though the Royals were just absolute garbage ever since they won. But they won. But Whit Merrifield didn't. But that doesn't matter. I digress. Jumping into 2018, which is Whit Merrifield's age 29 season, he would play 158 games in a season where the Royals would finish 58-104. This would be the worst record that he's had since he's been on the team. Worst losing record, or worst team just win percentage wise. But still, in this season, in his last season before he became an all-star, in his 158 games, he would lead the American League in hits. In his very third game in the league, he led the American League, the league that doesn't even let hitters hit because they have a whole other position, in the lineup, so they don't let hitters hit. Out of all those hitters, Whit Merrifield led the league with 192 hits in 158 games. He had 88 runs, which is great for a season, but considering he led the league in hits, he finished with 43 doubles. The first time he hit 40 doubles in a season, 12 home runs, 60 RBIs. He led the league in stolen bases for the second and final time in his career, or the second and the most recent to this date. The most recent time he's led the league in stolen bases. He finished with a 304 batting average, the first time his batting average was above 300 in his career. 806 OPS, first time that number was ever over 800. So he was starting to establish himself as one of the league's, at least he was at least starting to establish himself as one of the league's best hitters, if not one of the best two-way players in the game. But once again, he was kind of just surrounded by a team that just wasn't as good as their competition. And then jumping into 2019, this would be Whit Merrifield's first All-Star season. And this is, of course, when I think that with his consistency, I believe that he is an elite player and not a fluke. So in Whit Merrifield's age 30 season, which was 2019, the last full MLB season before COVID, he would play all 162 games, so the first and only time in his career up to date. He would lead the league in at-bats with, he was, you don't need that, but he led the league with hits. He had 206 hits in those 162 games, which is the most hits he'd have in a season by far. The first time he broke 200. This would be the third time he had more hits than games played. Second time he hit over 100 second time he hit over 190 balls in a season, which is incredible. He had 40 doubles, which is the second time he's had 40. He had 41 doubles, which is the second time he's had at least 40. He led the league in triples for the only time in his career up to date. He had 10 triples, which led the American League. He had 16 home runs, the second most he had in his career at that time, 74 RBIs, also the second most. He had 20 stolen bases, which is the third time he'd at least have 20 stolen bases. He wasn't close to what he was the previous season, but he was caught stealing more than anyone else in the American League. He got caught stealing 10 times, which is as much as before, but this time he actually led it. For the second year in a row, he'd finished with a batting average above 300. He had 302 with an 811 OPS, the highest OPS in his career to date. And, of course, he was named an all-star in a season where the Royals finished with 59 wins and 103 losses. That was their worst. That was their worst record in terms of just games behind like the first place team. So that's where the Royals were sitting following their last final season. And then, of course, going into the season, the stories, everything going into the 2020 season with COVID, they had to shorten the season to about 60 games, but they had to extend the playoffs. And even after extending the playoffs, the Royals still didn't make it. But Whit Merrifield in this season, he would play all 60 games in the season where the Royals would finish 26-34 with the fourth best record in the division. But of course, in that season, he would finish with he would lead the league in at-bats for the second year in a row. He would finish with 70 hits in those 60 games, which is the fifth consecutive year since the fifth year in his 5-year career in which he's finished with more hits than games played. He finished with 12 doubles, which is surprisingly close. Which was not surprisingly not close to his first season, considering how many games he played in his first season. He finished with 9 home runs, 30 RBIs. He finished with 12 stolen bases in a 60-game season. Finished with a 282 batting average, which for a full season, was the lowest, or which for a season since he's entered the league has been the lowest in his career. He had a 764 OPS, which is the second lowest to, I guess, his first ever year in the league. But of course, with COVID and everything going on, of course, everything that's going on was incredibly tough, especially for the Kansas City Royals. They had to go through all this. And Whit Merrifield was, I think, one of the few consistencies because Salvador Perez was hurt for a lot of this season. Whit Merrifield was the guy that they had to rely on to just come in and then just hit the ball. I mean, he led the American League in hits twice, which is an incredible feat that a lot of Hall of Famers have never done. He has a 206 hit season. He has as many 206 hit seasons as All-Star seasons, which is an incredible flex, and it's a pretty elite feat when you think about it. But as of right now, he is currently 32. He's going to enter a whole new season with the Royals, or depending on if they trade him, we'll see where he goes. But as of right now, he's on the Royals. he's a pretty average to slightly above average defensive player, but of course he's there for his hitting because he's a very exceptional hitter. He's very patient. He knows how to make contact. He knows virtually everything that he's doing, and I personally like watching Whit Merrifield play. I don't like watching the Royals play, but Whit Merrifield is a very, very bright spot on that team. And going into 2021 or just going into this season coming up, I definitely think that Whit Merrifield is a name to watch out for, definitely a name to look out for, because I do believe that Whit Merrifield, as a second baseman wearing number 15 for the Kansas City Royals, is an elite MLB player, an elite baseball player at the end of the day when it comes down to it. I want to thank you guys all once again for listening to this 10.5-minute piece. Once again, today is Sunday, January 24th, 2021. I am James Sims. Thank you for listening to The Elite. And of course, following this, I have one more profile on one of the greatest strikers to ever play, Luis Suarez, but I'll get into that with that said. With that said, check out my boy Whit Merrifield playing number 15 for the Kansas City Royals. And with that said, I want to thank you guys once again for listening to my piece. And peace out. I'll catch you with the individual profile after this.